The film begins by telling us that there are 200,000 miles of pipelines stretching across the world's oceans. These pipelines are maintained by professional divers. Divers descend to them specifically in diving capsules. This job is one of the most dangerous jobs on Earth. A diver may lose his life during one of the operations. The story of our film is a true story that actually happened. The events begin in Scotland. We see the young diver named Chris. He is returning home to his fiancée, Morag. He tells her that he has received a new diving mission and will travel for it the next day. He will stay there for a month. Morag looks worried about him. Chris tries to reassure her and tells her not to worry because this is not the first time. He promises her that he will come back to her. He tells her that his work as a diver is like being an astronaut. One dives into the ocean and the other into space. Then Chris goes to the port where the ship will depart. He boards the ship and greets his colleagues. He passes by the diving team leader, Craig, and greets him. Then he meets his colleague, Duncan, and greets him. We learn from their conversation that he has been a diver for 20 years and is very experienced. Chris arrives at the locker room and his colleagues tell him that David, the lead diver, is also on board. Then the divers gather and the leader Craig starts giving them instructions and guidelines. As usual, their journey by ship will last a month, so they can reach the location of the pipelines, which are deep underwater, and fix the malfunction. Before diving, 4 days in advance, they must enter the decompression chamber so their bodies can adjust to the pressure they will experience below. After their mission is done, they will return to the decompression chamber for another 4 days. They divide into teams, and each team consists of 3 divers. Chris, Duncan, and David are together. Chris approaches David to get to know him, but David does not talk much and seems arrogant. Chris welcomes him anyway and moves away. Duncan talks to David and tells him that Chris is a skilled diver, even if he is young. David replies that he prefers to keep things impersonal with anyone he dives with. Then they enter the decompression chamber to spend 4 days before diving. Chris hangs a photo of his fiancée Morag beside his bed. David asks him who she is, and Chris replies that she is his fiancée, and they will get married soon. David advises him to focus on the mission, because the diver must disconnect from life outside when he is in the ocean. After each team enters its decompression chamber, the door is closed on them, oxygen is supplied, and the ship starts moving from the port. Then we see the 3 of them eating together. Duncan tells them that this will be his last operation in the ocean, as the company will retire him after 20 years of service. They ask if he is upset. He replies that it does not matter to him, but looks visibly affected by the subject. Duncan talks to Chris and says that he is a good diver and will be able to depend on himself later without needing Duncan's help. After a few days, Chris is happy, watching videos sent by Morag, who tells him she is waiting for him and that he must keep his promise and come back. When the ship arrives above the pipelines, Craig tells the first team to get ready and go to the diving capsule to descend into the ocean. The 3 prepare, and Duncan enters the capsule first. Before David gets in, he tells Chris that both of them must follow orders in the water to succeed in the operation. He enters the capsule, and Chris follows them. Craig contacts them from the control room and lowers their capsule from the ship into the ocean until they reach 300 feet depth. David and Chris put on their diving suits. David exits the capsule into the water with a rope attached to his suit to help him return. Chris follows behind him. Duncan stays in the capsule as this is his role. Chris looks a bit nervous. David talks to him and tells him to act natural and gives him instructions to follow. They go to the gas pipelines and begin to inspect the malfunction and fix it. Duncan communicates with them from the capsule and gives them instructions. Meanwhile, in the ship's control room, a problem occurs. The transmitter malfunctions and they lose communication with David and Chris underwater. They try to fix the problem, but soon discover that the ship's thrusters are down. The ship can no longer remain above their location and will drift. Craig instructs Duncan to inform the divers to cancel the operation and return to the capsule quickly. Duncan tells them this. David orders Chris to leave what's in his hand and move quickly to climb the pipelines. While Chris is climbing the pipes, his rope gets tangled between the pipes and he cannot free himself. The connection between the ship and the divers cuts off completely. The wind causes the ship to drift and become unstable, pulling the capsule along. Chris is still trying to free his rope from between the pipes and cannot breathe. David orders him to use the backup air supply in his diving suit. The backup supply will only last 10 minutes. Chris asks what will happen after 10 minutes. David tells him that, unfortunately, after a few moments the rope will snap as the ship drifts and pulls the capsule. He insists that when that happens, Chris must return on top of the pipes to be in a place where he can be rescued. He tells him he has less than 10 minutes before he runs out of oxygen. Because the ship drifts further, Chris's rope snaps and he falls to a great depth. Duncan loses contact with Chris and he does not respond to him. Duncan pulls the rope up and is shocked to find it cut underwater. Meanwhile, in the control room, they do not know what is happening below because they have lost contact with the divers. David manages to return to the capsule after pulling his rope and reaching it. Duncan finds out that Chris's rope got stuck between the pipes and snapped, and that unfortunately, Chris must have died. Back in the ship's control room, Craig is talking to the officer and tries to convince him to drop the anchor to stabilize the ship above the pipes. The officer replies that there are gas pipes below, and an explosion could occur if the anchor falls on them. The ship's thrusters are broken, and it would be risky to try. He says the 3 divers below must manage on their own. We learn that Chris has only 8 minutes left of backup oxygen. At that point, Chris lights a flare, not knowing where to go or how. He tries to focus and follow the instructions to reach the pipes in the midst of the ocean. Back in the ship's control room, the thrusters suddenly work again. The officer talks to his colleague and tries to convince her to use full power to move the ship back above the capsule. She tells him that if they do, they might overload the system and break it again. He insists that the ship must not move away and must stay above the capsule for the divers below. She agrees, and they move the ship to above the capsule's location and remain there, waiting to restore contact with the divers to know what is happening below. Back to Chris, who is still holding the flare and trying to reach the pipes. He manages to reach them. He has to climb them quickly before his oxygen runs out. He tries his best to climb, but fails and drops the flare. He lights another flare and tries again, and this time he manages to climb and reach the top. At this moment, his oxygen is fully depleted, and he's about to lose consciousness. He remembers his fiancée Morag, who once told him on a video call that he must come back and keep his promise. Her words make him refuse to give up and give him incredible strength, even though he is about to lose consciousness. We return to David and Duncan in the capsule. David says their mission is now to recover Chris's body as he has run out of oxygen. It is hard for them to accept, but this is the reality for them. Meanwhile, in the control room, they try to move the ship closer to the capsule. One of the workers tells the officer he will try to repair the communication system with the capsule, but it will take time. The officer says he must do everything he can because every minute matters. The crew is able to activate a remotely operated vehicle, ROV, with a camera that was next to the capsule underwater. They see Chris unconscious on top of the pipes. Although his eyes are closed and his oxygen is gone, his hands are moving. This is evidence to them that he is still alive, but it confuses them since his oxygen ended 7 minutes ago. They guess these are involuntary spasms, and it is only a matter of time before his brain dies clinically. They try to race against time and search for a way to get him out. Craig comes up with an idea to save Chris. The idea is to use the ROV, which has a mechanical claw, to grab Chris by the diving suit's harness and quickly pull him back to the capsule. Although the ROV was not designed for this, Craig decides to take responsibility. He tries very carefully to make the claw grab Chris's harness. He keeps trying until the claw finally grabs him. He starts pulling Chris, but suddenly something prevents his body from being lifted. They discover that a clip from his suit is fixed to the pipes. Craig realizes Chris attached himself there before losing consciousness, so he wouldn't be swept away by the current. Craig says it was a smart move by Chris, and they should not blame him, even though now it is the problem. 16 minutes have passed since Chris ran out of oxygen. Back in the capsule with Duncan and David, Duncan tells a story about a previous shipwreck where they dove to recover bodies but could not find the last body, so they gave the drowned man's box of belongings to his wife. Duncan says he does not want to bring back just Chris's box to his fiancée. They must recover his body at least, or he will never forgive himself. David assures him they will not leave Chris and will recover his body so that his memory stays alive. Meanwhile, on the ship, a mechanic manages to fix the system and restore communications with the capsule below. Craig contacts them and tells them they saw Chris with the camera, and he is now above the pipes. David puts on the diving suit to go down and bring Chris back up. Before he leaves, Duncan tells him he does not want to lose 2 divers. David promises to return with Chris. David dives and reaches Chris's location. He releases the clip attaching Chris's suit to the pipes and ties him to himself. He pulls his rope to return to the capsule. This operation is extremely difficult because their bodies are very heavy underwater. Duncan communicates with him and tells him to take his time and not rush, encouraging him until David manages to bring Chris to the capsule. He pulls him inside after a huge effort. Duncan pulls Chris up after he stayed underwater for 29 minutes without oxygen. He performs CPR on him, trying to revive his heart. Amazingly, Chris starts breathing. Duncan is stunned. He lifts Chris and allows David to enter the capsule too, telling him that Chris is breathing. When Craig contacts them from the control room to ask about the situation, Duncan says Chris started breathing again, but is not showing any other signs of life. Duncan tries to talk to Chris and begs him to respond if he can hear him. Chris does not respond, and it seems he may be brain dead from lack of oxygen. Duncan is sad and starts to cry. David approaches Chris and asks him to give any sign if he can hear him, but unfortunately, Chris does not move anything. They are convinced they have lost him and it is too late. At that moment, suddenly, they are surprised when Chris speaks and calls out to David and asks if he is okay. They are happy and they tell Craig that Chris is speaking again. The whole crew is joyful and consider it a miracle. They begin lifting the capsule to the ship and bringing them back. They enter the decompression chamber where they must stay for 4 days. On the first day, David checks on Chris and tells him he stayed underwater without oxygen for 29 minutes. Chris says what kept him from giving up before he lost consciousness was his fiancée, Morag, as he promised to return to her from the trip. David understands then how much thinking about loved ones helps divers survive. He stands up, letting Chris rest, but Chris grabs his hand and thanks him for saving his life. On the second day, Chris calls Morag by phone and is happy to hear her voice. He reassures her and tells her something happened to him underwater, and he will tell her later. He tells her he will return in 2 days and will embrace her because he misses her. On the 4th day, they leave the decompression chamber. Chris bids farewell to Duncan as this might be his last operation. Duncan returns to the chamber, visibly emotional, as this could be the last time he enters it. Chris returns to his home, hugs Morag, and she is happy to have him back. Morag asks Chris about the problem he said happened to him under the ocean. Chris tries to lie to her, saying he had to save another diver who was left without oxygen underwater. Morag feels he is not telling the truth and asks if he was the diver. Chris admits that it was really him. She is shocked, but he reassures her and tells her he promised to return and that his promise brought him back. We then learn this is a true story and that Chris was without oxygen for 29 minutes and did not suffer any health issues. No one has an explanation for this strange phenomenon. We see real footage from Chris and Morag's wedding, where Duncan attended. After that, we learn that Chris, Duncan, and David returned once again to the ocean depths to complete their mission. But this time, they succeeded without problems. And that's the end of the movie. If you liked the video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to Cinema in a Nutshell. See you in the next summary. Peace.